Hello and welcome. Today we are going to be talking about macros for Frost DKs, and we'll be talking about macros for Frost DKs both in PvE and in PvP. I will tell you that I am PvP centric, and so these macros are definitely very PvP centric. However, I focus mostly on quality of life macros, and so I feel like no matter what kind of content you do, you will find some useful macros here. So I hope you enjoy the video. Let's go ahead and get into these macros. But first, a word from our sponsor, my Twitch channel, twitch.tv/ZodasWow. I go live every Wednesday and Friday evening at 5 p.m. Central Standard Time, so come and watch Two Hand Frost DK PvP, discuss everything Death Knight and Shadowlands, and have a good time. Link in the description down below. One of the most important tips that I've ever learned is less is more when it comes to macros. You don't want any macros, or at least you want very few macros, where you're batching a bunch of abilities together to try and save space on your keyboard, or to try and streamline your burst sequence, or anything like that. And there's a good reason for it. It's very nice to be able to push one button and do 3 or 4 things and really minimize that time in your burst sequence. That is a good reason to want to do that. But you run into problems in 2 ways. First off, if you have everything bound, let's say you have your one-shot macro and you have Empower Rune Weapon, Pillar of Frost, and Chill Streak. Yes, you're going to have one button to burst, and that's pretty great. But what happens when your Pillar of Frost has a 1-minute cooldown to show tooltip on it is set to Pillar of Frost? Well, you don't know when Chill Streak comes off cooldown. You don't know when Empower Rune Weapon comes off cooldown. You just see the tooltip for the Pillar of Frost. You see Pillar of Frost cooldown. This can absolutely mess you up. If you have it bound to your Pillar of Frost, then what is inevitably going to happen is you're going to use Empower Rune Weapon at a time that you shouldn't use Empower Rune Weapon. And that goes for any other button on your character. If you have your AMS bound to your Frostwyrm's Fury, then I can guarantee you're not going to want to actually use AMS every time you press your Frostwyrm's Fury. You're going to be wasting your AMS most of the time. I know that an example, especially like that, is like obvious, but that's the point. I'm trying to make an obvious example to kind of get across to you that why this can be bad. So in general, I highly, strongly, immensely recommend that if you want to get better, whether you're in PvE or PvP content, try to batch as little as possible. And when you do batch, make it make sense. You always want to use your trinket with Pillar. Blanket statement, generally true. The only reason you'd ever want to separate those out are in very niche circumstances, and most of the time you would probably just want to time out your Pillar better, and in doing so that would alleviate that problem. So for me, for example, I do have my trinket bound to Pillar. So now that I've gotten that point across to you guys, now that I hope you all understand that, and I hope that you've taken it to heart, because I promise you it's one of the quickest things you can do to instantly jump up in your arena rating or instantly get better at spreading out your defensives and your offensive cooldowns so that you have the most consistently high damage, consistent survivability you can possibly have. So now that we've gotten that through, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about the macros that I have. With that being said, since I'm not making one-shot macros and stuff like that too much, what I do make are utility macros. Macros that make my life easier, macros that make what I do quicker, macros that make sense always. So the first one we're going to go over is my Death Grip macro. It is a simple modifier shift, target equals focused, harm, Death Grip macro. So what this does is if my Death Grip's bound to E, so what this does, if I press E, then I will Death Grip my current target, whoever I am targeting. So if I hit Shift E, then what happens is my Death Grip will grab my focus target rather than my main target. And this is super important in arena. This is a pretty PvP specific kind of macro. And so this makes it great for interrupting enemy healer casts. This is great for gripping in that fire mage right before they get their G-Pie off or a polymorph off. This is great for pulling in a target into, let's say, running Windwalker DK, and you want to pull in the enemy healer or something, someone who's not your main kill target, into that Fist of Fury. This is great, just makes it instantly happen. They don't see you swap targets, it just happens, they don't see it coming, comes out of the blue. Now, with that being said, I have a few different macros that are the exact same thing as this, just with different abilities. I have the exact same macro for my Mind Freeze. If I hit F, which is where my Mind Freeze is bound, then it interrupts my main target, the target I'm currently targeting. But if I hit Shift F, then it will hit my focus target instead. Once again, great for stopping healers when they're not your kill targets, great for stopping mages when they're casting that polymorph or that G-Pie or that Touch of the Magi. You got Ebb and Bolt, that Ray of Frost. You get the idea. Super important. This is another thing, like if you can learn how to use focus target macros, this will instantly make you better in Arena, hands down. Now, let's talk a little bit about, oh, and I also had the same thing for my Chains of Ice. That's the only other one and my Asphyxiate. My Chains of Ice and Asphyxiate, you guys get the point, but they are the exact same thing, modifier shift, and so I can use them on my main target or my focus target instantly. All 4 of these macros are the exact same, just different ability name. For my Death Grip, my Mind Freeze, my Asphyxiate, and for my Chains of Ice. Now let's get into a different type of macro. Those are all those macros that I have. So on my Pillar of Frost, this is my one-shot macro. All it does is /use 13 /cast Pillar of Frost. So the reason that I have /use 13 in this is because it corresponds and correlates with the 13th slot on your character page, which is counted a little weird, but for Blizzard, this is the 13th slot, the way that they count it. This top trinket slot right here is your 13th slot. I do /use 13 because I've always been horrible at remembering to change out my macro every time I change out my trinket. So what this does is that regardless of whatever use trinket is in the 13th slot, it will be used. So I can swap my trinkets all day, every day, never have to change my macro. Huge quality of life improvement. Batching these two together is great because my trinket is on a 2-minute cooldown. Pillar of Frost, of course, is like less than a minute long. So that means that no matter what, when I press my Pillar of Frost, if my trinket's available, it will be used. I almost always want to hold my trinket for my Pillar of Frost, and this just pretty much guarantees that I always have it available when it's available. For my next burst cooldown macro, I have one for Empower Rune Weapon, and it's the exact same thing. And the only reason I have this is simply to guarantee that if for some reason I used my Pillar of Frost and my trinket wasn't going to come off cooldown for, let's say, 10 seconds or something, then this guarantees that between these two, my trinket's going to get used in my burst sequence, regardless of what stage in the battle I'm in. For the next type of macro that I use as a Frost DK, we have to talk about Anti-Magic Zone and other similar macros. What this macro does is it places my Anti-Magic Zone at my cursor, and what that looks like is just like that. I don't have to select on the ground, I get no little green circle, I don't have to click the button and then select where I want it to go. This just places it instantly wherever my mouse is on the screen. This is basically just a quality of life speed tool, and it absolutely works. Now, it does mean that you have to get good at making sure that wherever your mouse is, wherever you want that to go. It means you kind of got to learn the size and the radius of these things, but honestly, it doesn't take very long to get down, and it does make a massive difference, especially when you're trying to get things off, like an Anti-Magic Zone right before you get stunned. You know that Ret Paladin is about to stun you. You know it. You feel it in your bones. That guy's looking at you funny. You know that the next move he makes is going to be a Hammer of Justice. Every single millisecond counts to make sure that you get your Anti-Magic Zone down before he can stun you. That way, you are sitting happily stunned in the middle of a zone, protecting you. Another ability that I use the exact same macro for is for my Death and Decay. Once again, we're starting a duel, for example, going into an arena. I have a feeling I know where that pesky rogue is hiding. I don't want a single millisecond more than I have to have just because of the nature of the internet and servers to drop that DND. So all I gotta do is boom, right there, it's down. It's just mouse wheel up for me. I just roll that mouse wheel up, and wherever my mouse is, it drops instantly. My next macro is Lichborn. So this is a very important macro. If you don't have this macro, then when you Lichborn, which is our most important healing cooldown, you're going to have to pop the Lichborn, select yourself, and then hit your Death Coil ability. And ultimately, that is a pain, that is not realistic, and that also means you can't fight anybody while you're doing Lichborn. And as I've discussed a couple of times now, Lichborn is mainly, it's very important that you make sure that you pair your Lichborn to some degree with your burst or with a strength proc, because that Death Coil scales with your strength, that Death Coil's healing scales with your strength, and it is very important. Not to mention, you get 10% leech. you want to be pairing Lichborn to some degree with your burst, to some degree with your procs, so that you get the most out of it. So this macro does all that for you. It's slash cast sequence reset equals 20 Lichborn. I've tried it a dozen different ways. This is the only way it works. All these macros will be down in the description below this video so that you guys can go and copy them and just paste them right into your game. So it's slash cast sequence reset equals 20. That means that the macro will reset after 20 seconds. It casts Lichborn. The exclamation point makes sure that it doesn't cancel that Lichborn, and it will sometimes. If you don't have it, it will absolutely cancel it while you're smashing the button. It'll cast your Hypothermic Presence, which is an ability you're always going to want to pair with your Lichborn when you're running it. There are some niche circumstances. If you're running a Breath of Sindragosa build in PvE, perhaps you wouldn't want Hypothermic Presence in there. You're going to want to be using that Hypothermic Presence with your Breath. But for most people, and especially in PvP, you're going to want Hypothermic Presence in that macro. Then after that, it will cast at you. You want to replace my name with your name. So just literally, like, let's say your name is Zed, at Zed, Death Coil. And then it will automatically, you don't have to select yourself for anything. It will just cast your Death Coil at you, and it will streamline the whole process of healing with Lichborn. And how could we almost forget? Wouldn't be a video of mine if I didn't talk about weapon swapping. So for weapon swapping, I do use some macros. I don't actually use macros for my two-handed weapons. I literally just drag them out into my bar like that, and I use them that way. But for your dual wield weapons, it is very important that you have an actual macro or that you use your character thing, and I'll show you that in a moment. But for the actual macro, what I do, and it's down here, is I have, where is it? Weapon swap. So it does slash equip Tearing Sawtooth Blade, which is my main hand weapon. It is my high item level with my Fallen Crusader or Razor Eyes or whatever I have on it at the time. And then slash equip Corrupted Gladiator's Cleaver. When I press this button, it automatically puts on my dual wield weapons. So it's just, oh, I removed that one. There we go. So there you go. So that's all it does. Easy peasy, right? So the reason the macro is so important is because it makes sure you only need one button to actually equip 2 items, and it will guarantee that they get slotted into the right slots. The order in which you put these in is very important because it dictates what order your weapons will be slotted into your equipment slots in. And you want to have your higher item level weapon in your main hand slot and your weaker weapon in your offhand slot. The other way that you could do this without using macros, and I think it might actually be a little bit more reliable. I haven't tested it out a ton, but so far it hasn't really let me down. And there were times when either because of human error or because of the game, I'm not quite sure yet. I've just been fiddling with it, but maybe the macros weren't working properly. So what I decided to do was to try out using actual equipment sets, and so these are all named based on different sets, and I was too lazy to make new sets. And then you have, like, let's say Blood is my main weapon, so I'll put it there. Frost is my dual wield weapons, so I'll put it there. Unholy is my spell warding weapon, so I'll put it there. And then I just press that and it automatically swaps my set, but the only difference between my sets are my weapons. So yeah, another way to weapon swap. Like I said, this might be a little more reliable. I'm not 100% sure on that, but so far it hasn't failed me, and there's a slight chance that maybe the macros had. So test that out for yourself. Try out whichever one you think makes more sense to you. Finally, for my macros, I want to talk about some general macros that can make your life a little bit easier and definitely make things a little more streamlined and improve your quality of life. So the first one is a /use 13/use 14 macro. This is if you don't like the idea of binding your trinket to your Pillar of Frost, which for different types of content, different kinds of strategies you may not want to do, then I use this. So I just have a quick button I can just slap down on my bar, and this means that I never have to move my trinket. You know, let's say I change my trinket. In fact, I'll even do it for you guys. What we'll do is we'll take my trinket off and we'll put on my Gladiator's Medallion. How about that? Boom. Instantly, this changed. Inherited Insignia of the Alliance. Since it's /use 13/use 14, it will automatically use whichever one is a used trinket. Keep in mind that used trinkets do share a global cooldown of, I believe, 1.5 minutes. So it will always use your 13th slot first, then your 14th slot first. You can arrange this differently. You can make /use 14 on top, /use 13 on the bottom. Then it will work the opposite way. It will always use your bottom trinket first, and then if you press it again in 1.5 minutes, it will use your next trinket. There's a lot of strategies are based around this, and yeah, that's how you do that super easy without having to be dragging trinkets down everywhere all the time. The next one that I highly recommend are /target arena 1 macros. These make it super simple, so you can just, let's say I'm in an arena, I tap this and it will automatically target my first arena enemy, and it goes in order of how they're listed on your screen. So let's say in your Gladius, it's Frost Mage, Ellie Sham, Destro Warlock. Well, if you hit /target arena 1 macro, if you hit that macro, it will target the Frost Mage first, since they are the first in that order. If you do your arena 2 macro, it'll target the Ellie Sham, and if you do arena 3, it will target your third enemy. I personally don't use these. I personally tab target, and I also will sometimes just click the target as well. It's kind of a bad habit. It's much cleaner, it's much more efficient to use a macro, but I honestly don't have space for 3 more buttons, and I've just been doing it using tab and clicking their nameplates for my whole life. And so for me, the bad habit sticks. But if you want to be better than me, then you use these macros to target your arena enemies. The next one I highly recommend is mouse over focus target. This is a huge lifesaver if you don't have Gladius or something. If you have Gladius or Serena or one of those other kind of arena nameplate macro add-ons, then what you can do with those is you can actually right click the target's name. So like you can come over here and right click that Frost Mage, for example, and it will automatically set them as your focus target. Gladius and Serena both work this way. But if you don't have those, or you don't want to be clicking people's names like that, then you can actually set a macro /focus target equals mouse over. And this will basically make it to where you just mouse over the target's nameplate, whether it's out here in the world, like their literal nameplate, or you can mouse over their actual like plate on the UI over here and just click the button, and it will automatically set them as your focus target. The next one I recommend, and this goes back to the batching thing a little bit, is a pot macro. And what this is, and it's not what you think, it's pot for potion. And for potion macro, I put #show tooltip and I leave it blank. It's very important. And then I add in any potion that I might possibly want to use. So I haven't used this one in a while. So it's got saltwater potion for PvP, and it's got the potion of prolonged power from Legion. I haven't used it in a very long while. I have been just kind of putting my potions down on my bar. But anyways, what this does is you just add whatever potions that you're currently using in the expansion. Potion of unyielding strength, potion of countless armies, or whatever potion you're using. Brawler's potion of strength, you put them in this macro, you drop them on your bar in a spot where it makes sense for you, and there you go. The reason I do this is because I don't like putting potions in my Pillar of Frost. The reason why is potions are extremely expensive, in case you haven't realized. So if you have it macroed into your main burst cooldown, then every time you go do a world quest and you burst on some piddly whatever world boss, then you're gonna drink a freaking potion. That's expensive. That's real expensive. So rather than having my potions macroed into my Pillar of Frost, I much rather prefer to just have a potion button that I can just hit anytime I want to use a potion. No matter what kind of content I'm in, it's going to automatically use the right potion. If I'm in the Brawlers Guild, it's going to use my Brawler's potion. If I'm in PvP, it's going to use my Saltwater potion. If I'm in PvE, it's going to use the whatever the name of the current strength potion is. So that is what I highly recommend to save you a lot of money in potions. That will make a huge difference. The next macro that I'm going to suggest is the Skull macro, and this macro is literally /script set raid target whatever, all this stuff. All this stuff will be in the comments down below, or the description down below, so you can copy and paste it. All this does is it automatically places a skull. Here, I'll just drop that on your target. Boom. F1 is what I just put it to. I just click F1, it automatically puts a skull. This is not usable in PvP, sadly, because it would make target calling in Battlegrounds so easy. But in PvE, or just for playing with your friends or whatever, this is a great way to just easily set your targets. Great way to just get that over and done with very quickly. You can also do similar things with the world markers and all that. And I'll also leave a link to Wowhead, and they have a whole thing of general macros like these that are very helpful, as a whole list of how to make macros, different types of macros, tons and tons of reading and resource available to you there. I highly suggest you at least browse through some of it just to kind of get an idea of the amazing things you can actually do with macros. So there you go. Those are all the macros that I currently use as a Frost DK. These macros have absolutely changed my life and made my life a ton easier, and I highly suggest that if you're one of those people that we talked about earlier that are doing a lot of batching and trying to reduce the number of keybinds that you have, then I highly, 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 highly suggest to you that you start separating those things out and you start using your cooldowns more independently of each other. This will single-handedly make you a better player. I promise you that. 1000%, no ifs, ands, buts, or gimmicks here. You will be better off for doing it. So thank you so much. I hope that you enjoyed the video. Hit like if you did. It helps tremendously with the algorithm. And hit subscribe if you want to see more videos from me about Frost DKs and Shadowlands, and ring that bell notification so you get notified whenever I upload a video. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a great day.